Hello, welcome. So, I'm going to be talking about the inner child. This aspect looks different for everyone and it depends on your upbringing. What I do is that I use energetics for wellness. So, I look at energy as a point of reference so then I can understand human psychology. And this creates a form of spiritual psychology that I feel is more accurate than other forms of psychology. I know that a lot of people have used energetics for wellness, but I'm trying to build off of what other people have theorized, so then I can come up with a more up to date and modern way of looking at how we can resolve a lot of our psychological issues. So, in this video, I'm going to be talking about the inner child. And what I love about this aspect is that it is close to the heart. However, it is an aspect that can't be fulfilled because it is a past influence. This influence is something that we carry with us throughout our entire lives. So how we were raised, our upbringing, the things that we're familiar with, this is what drives us to either our goals and aspirations or towards the things that we want to avoid. It also is correlated with the things that traumatized us in the past. So this area can look very different, especially when it comes to the individual soul. So I can't say that this will work for everyone, but it has worked for me, and I think it can work for everyone. The main purpose of this is to, well, the main purpose of me doing energetics for wellness is so then I can give us an appropriate point of reference. So then we can see this as a technical way of dealing with our emotions and feelings and our thoughts. So then we have a healthier approach to how we view our emotions and how to deal with our emotions and the things that we think and how to reprogram our thoughts so then we can better ourselves. Okay? So the inner child, as I said, this really depends on the individual's upbringing, the individual soul, their memories, their traumas, and the things that they're familiar with. That looks different for everyone. However, I noticed that when it comes to what we're familiar with and our upbringing, the reason why our inner child becomes wounded is because we become familiar with things that aren't healthy. And a lot of the times, this is due to ancestral trauma or just generational trauma, where the family we're born into passes down trauma. Quite frankly, it's just baggage that is passed down, and you're expected to just deal with it, right? And it's never fair. It's never going to feel fair that you were born into such a circumstance. But I do think that we can still make ourselves better despite the conditions that we were born into. So when it comes to the inner child, this does look different for everyone. It is close to your heart. A lot of the memories that we have is based on this inner child aspect. And what we have to understand about this aspect is that it is an aspect that can't be fulfilled. So while we're accomplishing all these goals, while we're daydreaming about what we want for ourselves and all the things that we want to feed our ego with, what drives us a lot of the times is this inner child. Okay, this inner child is our first awareness, meaning that when you are young, this is where you're forming a lot of your main influences. So the things that are going to affect you later in life or influence you to do things later in life is based on the inner child. So when it comes to the inner child and healing it, this is what I suggest. The inner child can't be healed necessarily. However, you can heal how your inner child views things. And my first suggestion for everyone, especially if you grew up in a household where you didn't see masculine and feminine energy played out appropriately, my suggestion is that you balance and heal how you view masculine and feminine energy, and really balance how those energies interact with one another within yourself. And yeah, we can call this divine masculine and divine feminine energy in its purest form. Because when we talk about divine masculine energy or masculine energy in general, it is giving, it's protective, it provides, it gives everyone that security, and it's also wise, and it's direct, it's straightforward, and it creates that structure so then everyone knows what foundation you're building on, okay? And then when we talk about feminine energy is flexible, it's nurturing, it's understanding, it's compassionate. And when you don't have these characteristics when you're growing up as an influence in your life, and let's say you grew up seeing these traits played out in a more toxic sense, like you grew up with toxic masculinity, or you grew up with toxic feminine influences, then your perception of these energies is skewed. That's okay. It happens to everyone, right? Well, it happens to a large majority of us. It doesn't make you weird, but carrying on throughout your life, not understanding what these true energies look like can affect what your romantic relationships look like. And so this carries into how you are in your romantic relationships and who you get into partnerships with. Because you're going to be looking for what's familiar, because the inner child automatically gravitates towards what's familiar because it's looking for that sense of home. It's always going to be looking for that sense of home where it feels safe. But it's not necessarily that the things that are familiar make us safe. It's the real safety, the real divine energy that plays out through this masculine or feminine characteristic that makes us feel like we're being nurtured, we're being protected, we're safe, we're secure. And if we're not getting those things, then we associate what's familiar to us and what we know with how things are supposed to be in our reality. And that's not always going to provide us the most safety. So I believe that when it comes to healing this inner child, it's not about giving it things, it's about fixing how you view your reality and the things that you're influenced by. And also, I'm just gonna throw this out there, it's also about fixing how you see your memories, okay? Because a lot of times we stop ourselves from achieving greatness because we think that we don't deserve it. And a lot of it stems from this inner child wounding. It's like a reflection. It's the first reflection that bounces off of what we feel in our heart, or what our heart is containing. Our heart contains all these things from our astral travel, so it does contain things from the subconscious mind, and that subconscious memory can go as far as like your soul memory, things that you've stored throughout many lifetimes if you believe in past lives. But think about it, if you were a baby and you had preferences for a reason. You had preferences not because you were just brought into it. You had preferences because your soul contained that memory. And sometimes we remember things as children that really aren't our lives, and that's an example of our souls containing memory. And a lot of the times our heart is going to be one of the first things that catches on to that subconscious memory, that soul memory. And the inner child and the heart space are so they're not really interconnected, but they're so closely connected that we confuse what's in our heart with what's in our inner child. So back to the inner child, because I did make a video explaining the heart space, and I did talk about the inner child in that video, and I encourage you to check it out. It's called the heart chakra, the subconscious mind, and the astral body. So I encourage you to look at that. But for now, let's talk about the memories that your inner child usually holds on to, because these memories just are things that you're familiar with, and your upbringing, and the things that pretty much you've been influenced by throughout your entire life up into adulthood. You're influenced to do certain things because this inner child contains memory, and that memory is very 3D. It's always going to be 3D. So when you, from the heart space, projected that light source outward, it created this inner child aspect. And I can explain that in a separate video. I did explain it in my inner child video, so I encourage you to look at that. But the memories that we have in our inner child is really based on the 3D. And we all know that the 3D is not going to always satisfy us, right? Like, yeah, it's cool to own possessions. Like, a lot of the times, like children, if you think of children, they do like that shiny new toy, right? But we also have enough awareness, well, a lot of us have enough awareness to understand that things won't buy happiness, you know? You can own everything and it won't fix you. And think of this inner child as the same concept. This inner child likes to fill this void that it of this feeling of lack that it of the things that it never got. Let's say, the things that it never got, it tries to fulfill that with the ego. The ego usually becomes highly protective over this inner child aspect, as well as the heart space. So you would end up trying to fulfill this inner child through this ego, because the ego is your willpower and your drive to do those things, while your inner child is what influences you to want those things in the first place. So when it comes to the inner child and the memories that it contains, sometimes we try to fulfill what's in there because of what we didn't have. And that's already an inappropriate starting point, in my opinion, because the things that we wanted then aren't going to be as of value to us, in the current moment as they were back then. And also, a lot of things that our inner child didn't get, we may program ourselves to believe that we can't have those things when in actuality we can. It's just some energetic block that keeps us from believing that we can have those things. And we really do block all the other chakras into believing that, we can't will what we really want into existence, when really we can. So the inner child, because it's the first awareness, it has a huge impact on how the other chakras are going to behave. The inner child is a trip, okay? I just have to say that. I don't like talking about it too much because it can be very confusing even for me to understand, especially because it's different for everyone. But I know that this aspect of us is highly based on just our upbringing, how we grew up in this lifetime right now, and how we see ourselves in this lifetime. Yes, you can throw in astrology. I'm thinking about making a mind map, somehow for the astrological points for for reference, just for the future, so then later people can look at that map and understand where they're impacted or where they're hit on a personal level. I'll talk more about that in another video because I don't want to throw everything off. It sounds a little confusing. So let's say the inner child grew up in not so great circumstances, okay? And I can relate to this because I didn't grow up in so great circumstances, right? But you're gonna want to give your inner child everything you didn't have, okay? Which influences how you behave throughout your life. And that corresponds with how each chakra behaves, like how you use each chakra. And as I stated, each chakra can be programmed. Whatever you program in it really is based on this inner child aspect a lot of the times. And you have to go back in there and catch yourself in your subconscious mind and find out that a lot of things that you want to fulfill is just out of this need for either control or some need for security that you felt you lacked at some point. And that's not always going to be the case for you. You're not always going to be lacking, but somehow this inner child can make you feel like you are. So the memories that the inner child can contain can be inaccurate to your actual reality. And so you have to fix how you view your reality and how you view your memories. And what I suggest about fixing how your inner child views your memories is that you have to understand that you were just doing what you knew at the time, and that it's okay to surrender old patterns and habits that no longer will serve you, so then you can become your best self. In the end, you're going to outgrow certain things, and it's not until you somehow obtain those things and realize that you're still not happy, that's when you realize that things or the old things that you thought were going to make you happy really don't. And it's unfortunate that it can take a lifetime to understand that. But if we can catch people or catch ourselves before it reaches a long period of time, before we go years and years and years not understanding this, like if we can just catch it before then we're doing ourselves a greater justice by being able to heal and be more whole within ourselves than always chasing aspects that are so heavily influenced by the 3D that we think that things are going to fulfill us, okay? So with the perception your inner child has towards your memories, you have to make sure that you give yourself compassion for doing what you knew at the time and that it's not going to help you now. And I know that it's a really hard pill to swallow when you have to realize that like the things that you were influenced by then and possibly now were outdated. But it really does serve you to clear as much clutter as you can, because the more clutter that you clear, all the energetic baggage that you hold within yourself actually lowers the quality of your aura. And so you're not going to be projecting a lot of energy. You're not going to have a lot of energy. You're going to feel pretty lethargic holding on to a lot of energetic baggage, you know. And sometimes the inner child remembers memories that have a lot to do with what they should be ashamed of and why they couldn't do certain things, you know, and other limiting beliefs that really come from that wounded aspect of that inner child. But you have to have compassion for yourself and understand that everyone kind of has a wounded inner child. If you think about it, there's always going to be something that happened within our lives that kind of traumatized us to establish a new way of thinking. Even if it's not really serving us, we still did it based on survival and a need to feel safe, okay? And it's okay to feel like, you know, these things did hold you back and you want to drop them, or to feel like maybe you feel like you can't let them go. You just have to find a way to work with them. And if you see it as something that your energy is just working with, it makes it a lot easier to either get rid of it or to just continue to work with it. These are just tools. If you think about all these energies that I'm discussing, all the chakras, these are just our way of doing things. And they're tools that you use to get through your life or get through your experience in general, whether that be through your dreams or in real life. Not saying your dreams aren't real life. I mean, it is, right? But you know what I'm talking about. You know, the physical is considered real life because this is where we all connect with each other, and it's solid, so we all confirm that it's real, okay? But anyways, so let's talk about the other thing that would help heal this inner child. It's important that you start paying attention to what triggers you. A lot of our triggers come from this inner child aspect, okay? A lot of them. And even if something happens to you, you know, at this time and place of your life, a lot of it may still have to do with your inner child. Okay, you may not be a child, but what you're going through may have a lot to do with this inner child. So when it comes to your triggers, this is a great indicator of what's going on in your subconscious mind, okay? Your heart space does store these triggers, but so does your inner child. Your inner child, it was conditioned to behave a certain way, you know, in a way that didn't fit its template. However, it had to, based on survival, and the ego supports this. So when you do notice a trigger, this can either flash back to how you feel in your heart. Maybe your heart's feeling surprise and shock and breathlessness, you know. Maybe someone threw you a surprise party and your heart's just overwhelmed with joy and happiness that, you know, you're triggered into being speechless. Or you're triggered because something happened and it reminded you of that wounded inner child aspect of you. So this is going to look different for everyone. Everyone has different triggers. I can't say what a trigger looks like exactly, okay, because we all had different upbringings. But triggers are good indications of where you could, you know, improve how you interact with your world. Just putting it simply, you're not going to always feel like you've healed the things that trigger you. You know what I mean? Because it's so deeply ingrained that your trigger is just an indicator of the levels of security your environment provides for you. It could be that the trigger triggers something good, you know, and it's you're realizing that something is safe when you thought before it wasn't, or maybe it truly isn't safe and your body's trying to warn you because it's familiar and it's something you've already been through and you don't need to go through it again. But this inner child with its triggers is a good guidance system, and it's okay to pay attention to your triggers. You know, it's not supposed to be scary when things shake us emotionally. It can be, because the subconscious mind and the heart space really gets your heart racing when those things happen. You know, you feel that frightened energy in your ego, but in your heart space it translates as like rapid heart activity, like, you know, your heart starts racing. Maybe you have a hard time breathing. You start having anxiety in the chest area where you're maybe hyperventilating because you're having like a breakdown of sorts. But the ego is what kind of sends you into that fight and flight, okay? That's how the energy works. Like the energy, like all these different energy centers work differently. But I'm not going to be talking about the ego in this video. So when it comes to the triggers in your inner child and how you respond to those, they are good guidance. And if you do want to truly heal your inner child, it's safe to show your inner child the compassion and understanding to listen to those triggers. Even though it can be difficult to, not saying you have to confront everything about your inner child, because you really don't. You can, it does help, but the most you can do is be compassionate and understand that you can be here for yourself now and give yourself everything that you need now. And that's when we start stepping into that heart space. In several other videos, I did explain how the inner child is just a reflection. So what you feel in your heart, you know, that helps center you back to yourself. But when it comes to inner child, it's just a reflection. And although we try to fulfill this reflection, it's a reflection. It cannot be fulfilled. It's just what you're influenced by. It's literally you're looking back at the memories and why you don't want to do certain things anymore, and why you do things, or why you just don't. You know, maybe when you were younger you saw certain things work out and you saw things that didn't work out, and so those things highly influence how you're going to behave throughout your life. So healing the inner child, let's just recap. It involves healing how you perceive masculine and feminine energy, also balancing how you use masculine and feminine energy. And when I say how you use masculine and feminine energy, think of divine masculine and divine feminine energy in its real integral state of energy, not what you perceive growing up, because that may not be the correct way of how masculine and feminine energy should be played out. We have this big controversy right now where women aren't actually being women, right? Or men aren't actually being men. We're all kind of walking around with wounded masculine and feminine energy, and that's part of the reason why this is happening to us on a collective level. So it's really important that we start healing how we view masculine and feminine energy and see it in its real form, you know, its actual form and how it's supposed to play out, and not based on what we're familiar with or what we already know, because what we already know isn't always correct, okay? It's just what's familiar, and that doesn't make it right. Also working with your inner child with its perception of what's familiar, like just in general, what's familiar, and also having that compassion towards the memories your inner child holds. You know, you were just doing what you knew at the time. It doesn't mean that that has to be your permanent story. You're always developing. You always have the free will to develop and be a better person. So there's no reason to hold yourself like back and cause more energetic blockages due to past memories, you know, all the stories that you told yourself. There's no reason why you should allow that to affect how you feel in your inner conscious mind, and then, into your ego mind, and then your subconscious stores more of that memory, and then the impression you leave on the world is based on how you feel in that inner child. So the last thing that we talked about was the triggers. Being willing to listen to your inner child's triggers. If something really isn't satisfying you, you can listen to that, and it can help you. If your inner child doesn't feel safe around certain things, or maybe you're trying to allow it to feel safe around certain things because you grew up in an environment where you've had this skewed perception of things that were healthy and you think that they actually weren't, or things that you saw as familiar actually aren't serving you. Paying attention to those triggers is a good way to give yourself more guidance as to what you've been influenced by, so then you can put an end to the programs that hold you back. As I stated, these are energetic blockages, and energy can be transformed. It can be very hard because it's a factor you can't see. But it's because we contribute so much energy into something to the point where it becomes more dense and harder to remove. Okay, it just becomes buried deep within. And sometimes energetic blockages become hardened to the point where they're physical and we can just remove them. Sometimes they become hardened to the point where we can identify it as a psychological disorder or some form of neurosis. Or sometimes we can identify it as some form of emotional instability. But either way, energetic blockages, what it does is that the energy accumulates over time, and it creates this more dense version of this energy that either can be identified or it just blocks you for some reason, right? So I really hope this video is informative, and I hope it helped. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up button. It helps me get into the algorithm. Other than that, I'll be seeing you in my next video. You take care.